One of today's common misconceptions is that Christianity has nothing to do with politics. Christianity, it is said, is only about spiritual matters. It does not concern itself with temporal matters. Regrettably, this Neoplatonic mindset has swept through the Christian church and our culture, leaving a devastating wake in its path. Hello, I'm Jerry Johnson, and I welcome you to another edition of Against the World. In the Great Commission, Christ tells his disciples, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." Note closely that Jesus says that he has all authority in heaven and on earth. If Jesus has all authority in heaven and on earth, then wouldn't his authority encompass political matters as well? And it is on this basis of Christ's total lordship that he tells a small ragtag group of followers to go and make disciples of all nations, not just individuals, but nations, which should give us the answer to the previous question. Yes, contrary to cultural belief, the Lord Jesus is concerned with political issues too. In fact, Christ's total lordship over heaven and earth requires that all nations obey his laws, civil laws included. Thus, the Bible designates Christ with the political title, the King of Kings. This title logically implies that civil rulers must submit to him by enforcing the law of Christ, what I call Christonomy, and not the law of self, which most governments promote today, and individuals, autonomy. Why? Because there is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end there are the ways of death. And so Psalms 2, verses 10 through 12, gives rulers, kings, presidents, congresses, prime ministers, it makes no difference, this sober warning. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way. For his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. As we see in Acts 12, Herod refused to serve the Lord in fear. And what did God do? He struck him down. Contrast Herod with the pagan king Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament. God humbled and taught him that he was the true ruler of the cosmos, and therefore that God was even Lord over the affairs of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, after many painful lessons, finally acknowledged that the Most High rules on the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Since God is the source of morality, of what's right and wrong, it is Christ's lordship over the civil government that gives us the ultimate moral basis to oppose theft, murder, rape, and other crimes, all of which violate God's moral law. So what is Christonomy? As stated previously, Christonomy stands in contradistinction to autonomy. Christonomy is the law of Christ, and autonomy is the law of self. And what is the law of Christ? It is the law of love. In fact, explaining true love to his disciples, Jesus quoted the Old Testament. "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all of the law and the prophets." So, how do we, as Christ commanded, show our love for God? Well, we show our love for God by having no other gods before him, meaning false gods, by not making idols and treating them as if human hands can truly represent the infinite, unseen, uncreated God, by not taking any of his titles or descriptive names and use them outside of their proper context, and by remembering that he created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. My friend, according to the Old Testament and Christ, this is the first and great commandment: love towards God. So how do we show our love to our fellow man? Well, by honoring those whom God has set in authority over us, by not stealing from them or anybody, by not committing murder, keeping our covenant vows even to our own hurt, by not lying or giving a false testimony, and being content with what God has given us, not envying what he has given someone else. This law of love, defined by Christ and explained practically in the 10 Commandments, needs to be applied first and foremost to our lives, then our families, our counties, our states, our nation, and to the whole world. I hope that you can see that the answer to the law of love is simple, and that we are commanded to follow it through. Why? Because the one who has all power in heaven and earth said so. We are to teach them, that is the nations, to observe all things he has commanded you and me. Basically, if it is good enough for us, it is good enough for all the nations. But if we deny Christ's lordship over the state, we deny any moral basis for opposing social and moral evil. And the state, without being subject to God's moral authority, would be free to impose outright tyranny. William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, understood this well when he wrote, "Men will either be governed by God or they will be ruled by tyrants." If you call yourself a Christian, I sincerely want you to think about this. The doctrine that no higher authority than the state exists was the very mindset for the greatest injustice ever committed, and it was committed in both the religious and civil realms. It was the crucifixion of the Lord Jesus Christ, which was justified by his murder on the notion that we have no king but Caesar. So what about you? When it comes to political matters, do you have no other king but Caesar? Or do you submit to Christ's comprehensive lordship over all of heaven and earth? Will you kiss the Son and acknowledge that Christ is not only Lord of the soul, but of the state and everything else as well? Will you embrace Christonomy, the law of Christ, the law of love, explained practically in God's 10 Commandments? And will you live it out daily in your life? Until next time, this is Jerry Johnson standing contra mundum against the world.